They say retirement is the start of a new life, but for me it was the day I vanished. Want to know why? My daughter cried when she read my note. Don't blink, because you won't believe what happened next. Retirement. The word itself sounds like a vacation, doesn't it, for years? I pictured it as a golden ticket to freedom. No more alarm clocks blaring at 6 a.m., no more endless meetings that could have been emails, and let's be honest, no more pretending to like Karen's tuna casserole at the office potluck. I'd spent decades in that building, watching the seasons change through the same dusty window, marking time by the slow drip of coffee into the break room pot. I'd seen co-workers come and go, watched the young ones rise up the ranks, and even survive. 3 rounds of corporate restructuring. Through it all, I kept my head down, did my job, and saved every penny I could. I wasn't flashy, but I was steady, reliable. The kind of person who always brought a backup umbrella and remembered everyone's birthday. So there I was on my last day packing up my desk. It was a strange feeling, pride and nervousness all tangled up together. My co-workers had thrown me a little party, complete with a sheet cake that read, "Happy Retirement, Linda in blue icing." There were hugs, a few tears, and a lot of promises to keep in touch. I smiled for the photos accepted, a card stuffed with signatures and well wishes, and tried not to think about how final it all felt. My office, once cluttered with files and sticky notes, was now bare, just a few boxes left to carry out, and then freedom. As I walked out of the building for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in years. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and for a moment, I let myself imagine all the possibilities ahead. Maybe I'd travel. Maybe I'd finally take that painting class I'd always talked about. Maybe I'd just sleep in for a week straight. The world felt wide open, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited for what came next. I drove home with the windows down. Singing along to the radio like I was 20 again. My little house looked especially welcoming. That afternoon, bathed in golden light, I parked in the driveway, grabbed my suitcase and the last of my office boxes, and headed for the front door. I was ready to celebrate. I was ready to share this new chapter with my daughter, Emily, the person I'd worked so hard for all these years. Emily was waiting in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up as I came in. But I didn't mind. She was 28, busy with her own life, and I knew how it was. I set my suitcase down with a little flourish, hoping she'd notice the excitement in my eyes. "Well, that's it," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "I'm officially retired." She glanced up, her expression unreadable. For a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of something, pride maybe, or happiness. But then she rolled her eyes and let out a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her chest. "So what now?" she said, her tone sharp. "You're just going to sit around all day. You know now that you've stopped working. You might as well die. You're only good for money." Old hag. I froze. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe she was joking, but her face was stone-cold serious. My heart thudded in my chest, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I'd always known Emily could be blunt. She'd inherited my stubborn streak after all, but this was something else. This was cruel. Have you ever been sucker-punched by your own kid? Let me tell you, it stings in a way nothing else does. I stood there, suitcase in hand, feeling like the ground had just dropped out from under me. All those years of working late, skipping vacations, pinching pennies, so she could have the things I never did. It all flashed before my eyes. I remembered the nights I stayed up, worrying about bills the mornings. I woke up early to make her breakfast before school, the sacrifices I made so she could go to college without debt. I'd done it all for her. And now standing in my own living room, I felt like a stranger in my own life. I wanted to say something, anything to break the tension, maybe a joke, maybe a reminder of all we'd been through together, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just stood there blinking back tears, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was this really how my retirement was going to start? Was this what I'd worked so hard for? Emily went back to her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. I watched her for a moment, searching for some sign of the little girl I used to know, the one who used to run into my arms after school, who used to beg me to read her just one more story at bedtime. But she was gone. replaced by a woman I barely recognized. I carried my suitcase upstairs, each step heavier than the last. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and let the tears come. I felt foolish for expecting a celebration, for thinking that this day would be about me. I'd spent my whole life putting others first, and now at the end of it all, I was alone. But as I wiped my eyes and looked around my quiet room, a new feeling began to take root. Maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to finally put myself first. Maybe retirement wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And maybe, just maybe, I was about to find out who I really was when I wasn't busy being everything to everyone else. But first, I had to figure out what to do about Emily, because one thing was certain: I wasn't going to let her words define the rest of my life. Not now. Not ever. I'll be honest with you, after Emily's words, I spent a few days in a fog. I wandered around the house making coffee. I didn't drink, staring at the TV without really seeing it. I kept replaying that moment in my head, wondering if I'd misheard her, or if maybe I'd done something to deserve it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was tired. Tired of being taken for granted, tired of being the family ATM, tired of feeling like my only value was in my bank account. I'd spent my whole life making sure everyone else was comfortable, and where had it gotten me? Alone in my own home with a daughter who saw me as nothing more than a walking wallet. Now I could have cried, I could have begged, I could have tried to talk it out, or maybe even thrown a good old-fashioned guilt trip her way. But the truth is, I was done. Done with the drama, done with the disappointment, done with waiting for someone else to appreciate me. So I did what any self-respecting, slightly dramatic retiree would do. I decided to disappear. Not in a tragic call the police kind of way, but in a let's see how you like it when I'm not around to clean up your messes kind of way. First, I got practical. I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of strong coffee and a notepad. And I started making a list. Cancel every credit card check, remove my name from the joint bank account check, call the lawyer, and have my name taken off the house deed check. I even called the cable company and had the account switched to Emily's name, let her deal with the endless hold music for once. It was oddly satisfying, like cleaning out a closet you've been avoiding for years. Every time I crossed something off the list, I felt a little lighter, a little more in control. Next came the hard part, packing up my things. I didn't take much, just a suitcase of clothes, my favorite books, and a few family photos that still made me smile. I left behind the rest, including the fancy china Emily never let me use, and the ugly vase her father bought on a business trip. I figured if she wanted the house so badly, she could have it dust and all. But before I left, I knew I had to say something. Not a long dramatic speech, just a note, something that would make her stop and think, maybe even feel a little of the pain she'd caused me. I sat at my old writing desk, the one I'd used to help her with homework, all those years ago, and I wrote, Emily, I gave you everything I had, but I forgot to give you the chance to stand on your own. Now it's your turn, take care of yourself. Love, Mom. I folded the note and left it on her bedroom door, right where she'd see it, and before you ask, no, it wasn't just my famous meatloaf recipe, though I did consider leaving that, just to keep her guessing. Walking out of that house for the last time was surreal. I half expected Emily to come running down the stairs, apologizing, begging me to stay, but the house was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. I closed the door behind me and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt free. I didn't have a grand plan. I just knew I needed to get away, to clear my head and figure out what I wanted from the rest of my life. I checked into a little motel on the edge of town, the kind with scratchy towels and a vending machine in the lobby. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I spent the first night eating takeout Chinese food and watching old movies, feeling equal, parts terrified and exhilarated. I kept waiting for the phone to ring, for Emily to call and demand to know where I was, but the phone stayed silent. The next morning I woke up early and went for a walk. The air was crisp, the sky a brilliant blue. I felt like I was seeing the world. For the first time in years, I stopped at a diner for breakfast, and the waitress called me Hon and poured me endless cups of coffee. I chatted with a couple of regulars at the counter, laughing at their stories and sharing a few of my own. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a person, not just a provider. As the days passed, I started to settle into my new routine. I read books, took long walks, and even tried my hand at painting. I called an old friend from high school and we met for lunch, reminiscing about the good old days and making plans for the future. I started to remember who I was before I became mom, and the bank I was still scared. Of course, scared of being alone, scared of what the future might hold, but I was also excited to see what I could do, who I could be. Ecom now that I was finally living for myself, but every now and then I'd think about Emily. I wondered what she was doing, how she was coping without me there to bail her out. I wondered if she missed me or just my checkbook. I wondered if she'd read my note, and if it had made her cry. I hoped in some small way that my disappearing act would be the wake-up call she needed, because sometimes the only way to be seen is to step out of the spotlight and let someone else find their own way. And as I sipped my coffee in that little motel room, I realized something important. I wasn't running away. I was finally running towards something myself. I'll admit the first week was terrifying. I was 62 alone and suddenly free. In a way I hadn't been since I was a teenager. There's a strange kind of silence that comes with being on your own after so many years of noise. No one calling your name, no one asking what's for dinner, no one needing a ride or a check, or a shoulder to cry on. At first, that silence felt like a punishment, a cold echo of everything I'd lost. But as the days passed, I started to realize it was actually a gift, a blank canvas just waiting for me to pick up the brush. Of course, I had no idea what to paint. I'd spent so long living for other people that I'd forgotten what I even liked to do. So I started small. I took long walks around the neighborhood, letting my feet wander wherever they wanted. I found a little park with a hiking trail, and on a whim decided to give it a try. The first time I made it to the top of the hill, I stood there, wind in my hair, and laughed out loud. I felt strong. I felt alive. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could do this. Next, I joined a book club at the local library. I hadn't read for pleasure in years. Too busy, too tired, too distracted, but sitting in that circle of strangers, talking about stories and characters and dreams, I felt a spark I hadn't felt in ages. We laughed, we argued, we shared secrets over coffee and cookies. I made friends, real friends, not Jew. Saint people I knew, because our kids went to the same school for the first time in decades. I was living for me. And then, because I figured I had nothing left to lose, I tried online dating. Now let me tell you, that was an adventure. I made a profile, retired and mysterious. I wrote just to see what would happen. Turns out there are a lot of people out there, looking for someone who's lived a little, who's got stories to tell, and a few laugh lines to prove it. I went on a few dates, some good, some hilariously bad. One man spent the entire dinner talking about his ex-wife's cats. Another tried to impress me with magic tricks and nearly set the tablecloth on fire. But I didn't mind for the first time. I was dating for fun. Not for a future. I was learning to enjoy the moment, to say yes to new experiences, to let myself be surprised. Meanwhile, back at the house, Emily was left to face the world without my safety net. I heard about it through the grapevine, mutual friends, neighbours. Even the mailman who always had a soft spot for me, she called. She wrote, she even sent flowers, probably hoping I'd left her the house in my will. At first, I ignored her messages. I needed space. And I wanted her to feel the weight of her own choices. But as the weeks went by, her tone changed. The angry voicemails turned into tearful apologies. The texts went from, "Where are you?" to "I miss you, Mum." She even showed up at my old book club asking if anyone had seen me. They hadn't, but they told her I was doing just fine. I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt to see her struggle. I'm a mother after all. It's in my DNA to want to fix things, to swoop in and make everything better, but I knew deep down that this was something she needed to go through. She'd spent her whole life leaning on me, expecting me to catch her every time she fell. Now she had to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. It wasn't easy for either of us, but sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that matter most. As for me, I kept exploring. I took a painting class, the community centre and discovered I had a knack for landscapes. I volunteered at the animal shelter, walking dogs and cleaning cages, and found a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I even started writing in a journal, jotting down my thoughts and dreams and fears. It was messy, it was honest, and it was all mine. One afternoon I sat in a little cafe, sipping coffee and watching the world go by. I realized I hadn't felt this content in a long, long time. I wasn't rich, I wasn't famous, and I certainly wasn't anyone's idea of a success story, but I was happy I was free. I was living life on my own terms. Of course, there were moments of doubt. There were nights when the loneliness crept in, when I missed the sound of Emily's laughter, or the comfort of a familiar routine. There were days when I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake, if I'd thrown away everything for a shot at something that might never come. But then I'd remember the look on my daughter's face that day, the sting of her words, and I'd remind myself why I left. I deserved more than to be someone's backup plan. I deserved to be seen, to be valued, to be loved for who I was, not just what I could give. So I kept going, I kept growing, I kept living. And as the weeks turned into months, I realized that fear and excitement are really just two sides of the same coin. Every new adventure, every new friend, every new day was a chance to start over, to become the person I'd always wanted to be. And somewhere along the way, I found myself. Not the mother, not the provider, not the old hag my daughter once called me, but the woman I was always meant to be. Time has a funny way of softening the sharpest edges. Weeks turned into months, and the world kept spinning. Even as I built a new life for myself, I found a rhythm in my days. Morning walks, afternoons at the library, evenings spent painting or sharing stories with new friends. I was learning to enjoy my own company, to savor the quiet moments, to trust that I could handle whatever came next. Even as I grew stronger, there was a part of me that ached for closure, for some kind of peace with Emily. I missed her plain and simple, not the version of her that had hurt me, but the daughter I'd raised, the one who used to slip her hand into mine at the grocery store, who used to laugh at my terrible jokes, who used to believe I could fix anything with a hug and a cup of cocoa. It was a rainy Thursday when I finally agreed to meet her. She'd been reaching out for weeks, calls, texts, even a letter in the mail, written in her careful looping script. Each message was softer than the last, less angry, more honest. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for help. She just asked for me, so I said yes. We chose a little cafe, halfway between her place and mine, a quiet spot with chipped mugs, and the smell of fresh bread in the air. I arrived, early nerves jangling, and ordered a pot of tea. I watched the door, half hoping she'd show up, half afraid she wouldn't when she finally walked in. I barely recognized her. She looked older, maybe wiser, definitely more humble. There was a heaviness in her eyes, but also a kind of determination I hadn't seen before. She spotted me and hesitated, then crossed the room with slow, careful steps for a moment. We just stood there, unsure of how to begin. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. My note, the one I'd left on her door all those months ago. It was tear-stained, the edges worn, soft from being unfolded and refolded. She handed it to me, her hands trembling just a little. "I read this 100 times, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't understand it at first. I was so angry I thought you were abandoning me. But now I get it, I really do." I looked down at the note, remembering the night I wrote it. I'd been so sure, so resolute, but also so scared I wanted her to know I loved her. But I also needed her to understand that love wasn't the same as rescue, that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is to let them figure things out on their own. I read the words again, as if seeing them for the first time. "I gave you everything I had, but I forgot to give you the chance to stand on your own. Now it's your turn. Love, Mum." We sat down, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain tapped against the windows, a gentle, steady rhythm. Finally, Emily broke the silence. She told me about the months since I'd left, how hard it had been, how many mistakes she'd made, how many times she'd wanted to pick up the phone and ask me to fix everything. But she didn't. She learned to budget, to cook, to handle the little disasters that used to send her running. To me, she found a job she actually liked, made friends who didn't care about her last name or her bank account. She even started volunteering at a local shelter, walking dogs and cleaning cages, just like I had. I was so angry at you, she admitted, her eyes shining with tears. But now I see you were right. I needed to learn how to stand on my own. I needed to know I could survive without you holding me up. And I did. I really did. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was smaller than I remembered, but strong. We sat like that for a while, just holding on, letting the past settle between us. I told her about my own journey, about the fear and the freedom, the new friends and the old dreams I'd rediscovered. I told her about the book club, the painting, the hiking, even the disastrous online dates. She laughed, really laughed, and for a moment it was like we'd turned back the clock. We hugged right there in the middle of the cafe, and we both cried. Not the bitter, angry tears of before, but the kind that wash things clean. For the first time, we saw each other not as a wallet and a dependent, not as a martyr and a burden, but as two women both learning how to live. We talked for hours, sharing stories, making plans, promising to do better. We didn't pretend everything was perfect. We didn't sweep the hurt under the rug, but we faced it together honestly, bravely, with open hearts. As we left the cafe, the rain had stopped, and the sun was peeking through the clouds. Emily slipped her arm through mine, just like she used to when she was little. We walked down the street side by side, not as mother and child, but as equals. Two women who had been broken and rebuilt, who had learned the hard way that love sometimes means letting go. Looking back, I realized that note changed everything, not just for Emily, but for me too. It was a reminder that love isn't about holding on so tight you smother someone. It's about giving them the space to grow, to stumble, to find their own way. It's about trusting that, no matter how far apart you drift, you can always find your way back to each other. And as we walked into the brightening day, I knew we were both ready for whatever came next, together but also finally on our own terms. So what would you do if you could start over? Would you disappear? Or would you fight to be seen? Sometimes love is mistaken for obligation, until it's gone. This is a story not of revenge but of self-respect, and the quiet strength it takes to walk away. Thank you for watching this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value every story and every voice. Don't forget to subscribe to Tears and Strength and share this video with your friends.